All right, welcome to NCSA Live. My name is Kyle Winters, recruiting manager here with NCSA, and we have a great topic for you guys today. It's, I would say, one of the most misinterpreted aspects of the recruiting process, one of the most difficult angles of recruiting to follow. We'll talk about that here for a little while, but first, we're coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you guys have any questions about our topic today or about any aspects of recruiting in general, put them down in the comments section. We'll get to the questions at the end. I'm joined yet again by recruiting manager Phil Wells. Phil, how are you today?
Doing extremely well, Kyle. And you talk about this subject like it's not super exciting. I'm ready to get into the weeds and depths of it. It's pretty important here.
I think it's exciting because it's very complicated. It's not very straightforward. The terms don't necessarily make a ton of sense. No offense to the NCAA. We love the NCAA here, but that's why we're doing this, to make them a little bit more clear and hopefully give you guys a little bit better sense of how to use the NCAA recruiting calendar. So in case you guys don't know or you're unfamiliar with them, the recruiting calendars are as follows. There's the evaluation period, there's the contact period, the dead period, and the quiet period. And none of them are as straightforward as just that, like a dead period is where there can't be any contact from college coaches or with student athletes. They don't necessarily have to do with the actual contact dates that exist for the NCAA or the NAIA, which doesn't have any contact restrictions. So they don't have to do with like the June 15th or September 1st contact dates that exist for college coaches and student athletes. They're a little bit more nuanced than that. So this pertains to Division I, Division II schools for the NCAA. So first and foremost, Phil, I'll just pass it to you. What are the NCAA recruiting calendars in the first place?
Really good question, because it can be confusing. The NCAA recruiting guidelines, or calendars, these are the time periods outlined for when Division I and Division II college coaches can communicate with you, or a period in which they can't communicate with you. And within these time periods, again, it can be a little bit tricky because these are periods that are outlined for college coaches, but they don't necessarily represent when the process actually starts for a student athlete. Every year at this point, we're seeing that the recruiting process is starting earlier and earlier for student athletes. At this current time, student athletes and their families as early as 8th grade, we're seeing tons of different actionable things, actionable steps that you can start with in the recruiting process. Kyle, all from actually researching colleges, student athletes actually ensuring early that they're on a pathway to NCAA eligibility. Again, really important. We're seeing families research different division levels. We know it goes far beyond Division I and Division II. We're even seeing families who are definitely getting ahead of the game as early as 8th grade, proactively reach out to college coaches, letting them know that they're prospecting. Hey, maybe here's some of my information so you can track my progress.
Yeah, and I actually talked about it this morning on a recruiting force call with our entire team that we have student athletes in our network who are 2025 graduates, so a year out of 8th grade. It means they were starting this process probably a year ago, that are getting views from college coaches, that are getting follows from college coaches, that they're sending out emails to college coaches in double digits, into triple digits for some examples. We have 2025 graduates who have over 100 emails they've sent to college coaches that have been opened and looked at by college coaches. There are dozens of student athletes in freshman year who've already gotten scholarships. We could look at a sport like baseball where there's 75 student athletes already committed. There's 15 high school football players in the 2025 graduation class who've already gotten scholarship offers from just Florida State. So there's dozens that are already getting recruited. So these don't necessarily signify when recruiting starts. There's a lot that can be going on, but they're actual terms and periods within the recruiting process that stipulate what a college coach can be doing. And that's really what we should key in on, is that a lot of these much more pertain to what a college coach can be doing. At the end of the day, there's a lot student athletes can be doing. They can be proactive. They can be initiating contact and reaching out really essentially at any time. This has more to do with in-person contact and some of those types of things. So the first one we'll dive into is the evaluation period, which is pretty straightforward. The evaluation period is a specific time of year when college coaches are allowed to watch an athlete compete in person or visit their school. Okay. However, coaches are not allowed to communicate with that athlete or parents off the college campus. Coaches can sit in the stands during recruits practice or game, as well as visit the recruit school. It gives them a chance to go out and watch the student athletes, but they can't have contact with them unless they're on their campus. So again, a little bit convoluted. They go out and watch, they go out and evaluate. They just can't talk with the student athlete like after the game, during the game, in between games, whatever it may be, unless they're on the college campus. So they're evaluating student athletes in this time period. That's the easiest way to think about it, is that they're out at games, they're watching student athletes. They just can't talk to them at the game. Next period we can kind of go into, Phil, I'll let you take this one, is the contact period, which is seemingly pretty straightforward as well.
Absolutely. Some similarities, but a little bit different, ultimately straightforward. Amongst the contact period, it is also a time where college coaches can get out and, visit you at a tournament, visit your high school. This time they can also visit your home. This is typically in the contact period, a time period where college coaches reserve to get to know their top student athletes, their top recruits on their radars. They're looking to get to know you directly, because typically this is that time period where they're looking to solidify their offers. So they want to really find out, who you are as a student athlete. Kyle just talked about in the previous period, in the evaluation period, college coaches may be gaining insight from counselors and teachers not speaking with you directly. The contact period is that time where a college coach can get some insight into your personality directly from you as a student athlete, directly from you as a family. And they want to really just ultimately make sure that aside from what we're doing in the classroom, aside from what we're doing on the field or the court, that you're also a good positive addition to the program, to the college. In a lot of ways, college coaches have to pick up more than what they can actually see on paper.
For sure. So evaluation period, they can go watch you in person, can't talk to you in person. Contact period, they can essentially do anything. They can talk to you, they can go watch you. There's not really any restrictions. Dead period is probably one of the most misinterpreted periods that come about in the recruiting process. What that refers to, you guys might remember during lockdowns last year, there was an extended dead period for Division I schools. Division II ended up getting opened up, I believe, like September of last year. But the dead period refers to a time when coaches may not have any in-person contact with recruits or their parents. So they can't come onto the campus. They can't have any contact in person. They're not able to just be in person with a student athlete. That being said, they still can talk to you over the phone. They still can email. They still can text message, depending on where you're at with the actual contact dates, which are typically June 15th to September 1st after student athlete's sophomore year. So dead period essentially means that you can't have any in-person contact with a college coach. A college coach can't have any in-person contact with you, but they're still going to be communicating with student athletes that are interested in various different ways. That's why it's so misinterpreted. People think that recruiting just stops in general. It's very much not the case. And our last contact period, our last period that we talk about through the NCAA is our quiet period, which Phil will talk a little bit more in detail about.
Yeah, absolutely. So 4 periods, they can get confused a little bit. The quiet period is the last period, and it definitely differs from the overall dead period. Our quiet period is another period throughout the year where college coaches, they are absolutely in this period not allowed to communicate with you in person unless it's on their college campus. Now, this is also a period where they can't watch you compete at your high school or period. Now, again, that can be a little bit confusing. To break that down more, for college coaches in the quiet period, unless you're on their college campus, they cannot communicate with you in person. Okay, not at your high school, not at a tournament. To communicate with a college coach in person during the quiet period, you must be on that college campus. Additionally, in this period, a college coach may not see or evaluate you compete in person by any measure. So within this period, we typically see college coaches, again, having that meet and greet on their college campus, being able to speak with different families and the student athletes, showing them around a little bit. But this is more so a sacred time aside from, again, watching the competition.
For sure. So again, the evaluation periods that we have, or the periods I should say that we have, are the evaluation period, the contact period, the dead period, and the quiet period. Again, not super straightforward with all of them, but the one thing to keep in mind is that contact and getting recruited in the first place is not dictated by these different periods. And these are really guidelines for college coaches to know when they can be proactive in meeting with student athletes and talking with student athletes and having in-person contact with them, meeting families, some of those types of things. The more contact directly from college coaches, like I said, that's going to come from the June 15th and September 1st dates for college coaches. And for student athletes, we talk about it quite often, that you shouldn't be waiting around for college coaches ever, that you guys should be the ones who are being proactive, trying to get your information out in front of college coaches. So you can find your sport D1 and D2 calendars. We'll put a link up there in the upper right-hand corner and description for more info. So check out that link. It'll give you more in-depth detail about your specific sport, grad year, D1, D2, all those different criteria that you need to know. But Phil, I don't know about you, but when I was going through this recruiting process, I didn't know any of these existed. There was only two periods for me. There was Kyle's not getting recruited, and then suddenly Kyle is getting recruited. I don't know. Was your process similar to mine, or did you have a little more insight to this?
Well, I had a little bit more insight, but I would definitely say it was still a little bit of a rocky road. Kyle, I was fortunate enough to be an NCSA athlete, so NCSA did kind of steer me in direction once I became a junior. But these are a lot of terms to have down. These are a lot of periods to have down. And ultimately, without getting into the weeds of things, the best thing you can do as a recruit and as a family, start the process early, start educating yourself. And again, just like how you talked about, get that early start. Research colleges, research the NCSA eligibility or NCAA eligibility, excuse me. Start getting ahead of the game, because guess what? College coaches, they are mandated to follow a lot of these recruiting periods. They have to follow the recruiting rules to even actually stipulate the kinds of communication they have. But they have to have somebody to reach out to. And if they don't know you, then it's going to be hard for them to even follow that rule guideline by actually targeting you as a student athlete versus someone else. So start getting proactive, start reaching out to student athletes. That way, when college coaches are able, they can follow their guidelines, but you can be somewhere on their list.
Yeah, Phil, I think you nailed it on the head. Just when it comes to recruiting, there's just so many student athletes that are competing across the country in every sport. We can look at a sport like football, where there's over 1 million high school athletes competing in football across the country. Men's track and field has over 600,000 student athletes that are competing in high school. Baseball, somewhere right around 500,000 student athletes that are competing across the country. And so it's really easy for a college coach to just overlook hundreds, if not thousands, of student athletes who are good enough and smart enough every single year. And in the recruits that I was looking through yesterday and this morning, trying to get a better understanding of what's going on with 2025 graduates, the athletes that I saw who were getting more attention, who had coaches viewing their profile, following their profile, opening their emails, they were not necessarily the best student athletes on paper in our network. There were student athletes that were ranked higher than them, that on paper looked like they were better than them. But they were the ones who were being proactive. We're talking about freshmen in high school who were sending out dozens, in some cases hundreds of emails, and had coaches taking more interest in them. And that's really the best way to get ahead, is by not just waiting for coaches and hoping that they happen to find you, because it's so unrealistic these days, but more specifically being the drivers of the process, putting together a strong NCSA profile, getting skills or highlight video on that profile, even if you're not where you're going to be. It's all about projectability. And then trying to get that out in front of a lot of college coaches and zeroing in on what schools are going to be the right fit, what athletic levels are going to be the right fit, what academic fields are going to be the right fit. There's so many variables to work through in the recruiting process that starting as an 8th grader, as a freshman, that's the best time to start very wide and narrow it down to the best fit for you guys by hopefully the start of the senior year. I wish I had known that. I wish I'd had NCSA like Phil, because I was floundering in my senior year, just hoping I was going to get found, and happened to be at the right place, the right time, and did well, and was very fortunate. And some student athletes are lucky enough to have that type of process. But as I mentioned before, tens of thousands every year who are good enough and smart enough miss out on those opportunities and don't get the opportunity to play at the next level. Phil, I'm sure in your time you've spent with NCSA, you've probably spoken with dozens, if not hundreds, of student athletes that kind of fit in that category.
Yeah, I think you put it pretty beautifully, Kyle. And I think as far as closing points amongst that particular topic, we talk about it all the time. The number of college coaches out there, the number of college opportunities out there. Again, almost 1,000 roster openings that we actually seen this morning. from one particular sector of the recruiting process. There's a whole lot of opportunities out there, but that doesn't even scratch the surface when it comes to the amount of actual student athletes looking for those opportunities. So we have to do all we can as a student athlete to make it easy on a college coach. Okay, college coaches are already battling against all odds to try to find you as a student athlete out of millions of student athletes across the country. It is their job to find the best. If you can make it easy on them, that'll actually help out and help move along the process a little bit when it comes to increasing your likelihood of connecting with a college program. Then the last component, as far as just the recruiting process goes and how college coaches operate, make sure as a student athlete, as a family, you get ahead of the game. We've talked about it a ton, but a little bit cliche, I'll mention it anyway. There's said to be 4 to 5 years to be done of recruiting work to be done in the recruiting process. 4 to 5 years of work to be done in the recruiting process. If we try to fit all those years of work into 2, maybe when we're starting as a junior, we're going to be behind. If we try to actually stay ahead of the game and start that 5 years of work while we're in 8th grade, we're going to be a little bit more organized and that much more likely to find opportunity.
Phil, you talking about that sounds like me prepping for every essay, project, test, studying, everything that I ever did.
A lot of parallels, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's real similarity, and I'm starting to get anxiety just thinking about that. So let's move on from that because it's starting to freak me out. Again, the periods that we're talking about: evaluation, contact, dead period, and quiet period. If you guys have questions about those, throw those in the chat. If you have questions about recruiting in general, throw them in there, and we'll work through some of those questions right now and see if we can get to as many of them as possible and just try to answer your guys' questions. So first one, Joe Trevino. Our recruiter coach said they only watch film on varsity. Is this true? Phil, you want to take that one away about varsity film?
Yeah. So a lot of different variables that are definitely coming into play there. When it comes to overall, generally speaking, varsity film is going to be the most valuable to a college coach. But a lot of generalities in that as well, because depending on who you are as a college coach and what you're recruiting for, as far as sport, as far as position, there may be very, very good value out of watching film as an underclassman as well, maybe even before you get to varsity. So make sure you still are recording and documenting that film, because college coaches in general love to see progression. And sometimes if we can show progression from freshman year where we're not on varsity to when we do get on varsity, that can go a long way. Always know, again, varsity is obviously going to be the most valuable though.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard as our recruiting coaches for them to put like a ranking on a student athlete based on like some third level footage or even JV footage in some cases for like football, basketball. It's hard because college coaches, at the end of the day, they're going to want to see a student athlete playing against the best competition. So I don't think it's a setback or a bad thing if you have younger footage on there. It's just something that to be acquired and added to over time. I think that's kind of at the end of the day what we're trying to focus on our recruiting coach side of things is making sure they're putting our student athletes in the best place for themselves, knowing that coaches want to see their best competition. So good question, Joe. Continue working at it, continue updating it, continue planning out and doing research, and things will come together moving forward from there. So really good question. Monique asked, do they notify you if they are interested in your son, or how do you know your son is being looked at? Well, Monique, that's a really good question. If you don't know as of right now, probably means they're not being looked at, because you would know. They would notify you in some way, shape, or form, whether that's going directly to the high school coach or travel coach. That's a little bit more of the old school philosophy of how student athletes would get recruited. They go to the coach and let them know. Student athletes in our network, the easiest way for them to know is they can see that a college coach is viewed or followed their profile. They can see that a coach has opened their email. They may be getting responses from an email. They may be having phone calls with a college coach. Any sort of direct contact or direct notification from that coach that they are looking at your student athlete is going to be the main way. If you're not hearing anything from coaches at all, probably means that student athlete is not getting recruited. That's okay, but that probably means you guys have a little bit of work to do to start getting them caught up. Cool. Next one we have, this is more of a comment than a question. We'll probably try to turn it into a little bit of advice, but I'd like my son to get into this cycle soon. Granted, he's young, but we can hope for the best for sure, Mike. We can hope for the best. So, Phil, any advice as to how Michael can get his son introduced into this cycle of recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, it definitely depends on where we're at as far as grad level and age group. But again, never too early to start the recruiting process as far as some of the things we mentioned earlier, like researching colleges, researching division levels, researching different opportunities that do lie at the college level. So when we get there, we can be prepared. But now also formally speaking, again, college coaches can start being proactive with student athletes as early as 13 years old. Sometimes that's the summer in between, or right before freshman year, typically the first day of freshman classes. We're rocking and rolling in the college coach department. So should you as a student athlete. So as far as getting the process started, reach out to us here directly at NCSA. We can definitely help you along those lines. But if you know that your student athlete wants to play in college, now is the time to absolutely start if you're thinking about it.
Absolutely. Very good point. Cool. Greg asks, we are international based in London looking for a tennis scholarship for the fall of 2022. Are we too late? So, Greg, no, I wouldn't say you guys are too late. Yeah, I'd say probably definitely behind a little bit right now. We talk about student athletes kind of finishing up their recruiting process in the fall of their senior year, the fall of the year before they head off to graduation in college. That being said, there are opportunities out there. There are still schools, there are still coaches that are looking for 2022 graduates in every sport that we work with. It's going to take being more open. It's going to take being more proactive. You guys are going to have to do, like Phil talked about earlier, 4 years worth of work in a much shorter period of time. So if you haven't connected with us already, do connect with us. Drop us a line, let us know your contact information, and we'll follow up. We'll talk about what to be doing and what maybe your student athlete's open to. At the end of the day, there may be some sacrifices that need to be made, but there are opportunities out there, and we can definitely talk to you guys through them. It's a really good question. Cool. Next question we have coming up here is from Leslie Ann. The coaches decided where they visit. I'm not exactly sure what that means, Leslie. The coaches decided where they visit, but it sounds like you're asking about how do the coaches decide where they're going to go visit. It's hard for us to answer that. Phil can probably talk a little bit more in detail about what kind of the thought process is for college coaches when they're figuring out their schedule, who they're going to go watch play in person.
Yeah. And if that is indeed the context of the question amongst how college coaches come up with that decision, a lot of variables come into play. And again, a few examples of those variables are the size of a program we're talking about. Most programs will have a traveling budget and they will be able to, travel to certain areas, but maybe not certain areas. If we're talking about a college here in Chicago, it may be a tough stretch unless we're a Division I program to get out to a high school for a quick visit out in Washington. So it definitely depends on that aspect of it, but it also depends on where you're typically at in the recruiting process on that college coaches prospect list and how progressive you have been within that recruiting relationship. A lot of variables come into play. Also, how much a college program is ranking you as a top recruit or not. A lot of variables come into play. The easiest way to start judging between where you lie is to communicate directly with that coach.
Sure. And that's probably one of an overlooked pieces of the recruiting process is that college coaches aren't just kind of going out to a tournament or going out to watch student athletes just kind of on a whim. Coaches, as we're finishing up the fall sports, football, volleyball, some of the sports are finishing up right now. Those coaches have already figured out, what they're going to be doing for the winter. They already know who they're going to go watch after the season. The student athletes for basketball and hockey coming up in the winter, they have, their schedules figured out already. They know who they're going to watch. The AAU coaches are figuring out, the college coaches know where they're going to go watch AAU coming up in the winter and spring as well. So they're ahead of this process. They're not just waiting around, going out and hoping they're going to figure it out. They know who they're going to go watch in person. So we have a couple last questions we'll go through pretty quick here. So Neil asks, track and field Division I official visit coming up. Any advice? Phil, for a track and one official visit coming up? Congrats, first off. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats. And have a game plan going into it. Have a game plan. It's a huge ordeal. Typically, again, when we look at those kinds of visits, it may be another offer tied to it. We can definitely expect some communication tied to it. We can definitely expect a tour. We can definitely expect mutual interest looking to be gained from that college program as well as you as a family. So again, go into it with a game plan, prepare a list of questions that you have. Okay, don't try to go into it, and wing it. Prepare a list of questions that you can have documented to ask that coach when you get to that program, and then think about some of your interests and some of your preferences as far as what you want out of a college for your 4 to 5 year home when you move on to the next level. Make sure during that visit, somewhere to some extent, that program fits your mode of what your preference looks like for college.
Yeah, and I would say building off that, practice those questions. Don't let the first time you're asking them be while you're with the college coach. Practice them at home. It's perfectly fine to do that. It may feel a little silly sitting there talking to mom and dad, asking these questions, but once you've done it a few times, you're going to feel a lot better. Cool. Last question, and we'll turn it over to some commitments. Darcy asks, how common it is for coaches to reach out before the start of freshman year? So it's a good question, Darcy. I would say, it's hard to say how common something is. I would say it's not terribly common. It's not happening to every single student athlete across the country. That's one thing that we talk about, is that though there are student athletes who are 8th graders or freshmen who are having contact with college coaches, in some cases maybe getting scholarship offers or talking commitments, that's not where we expect student athletes to be. That's not where the vast majority of student athletes are going to be in the process. They're not going to be getting contact before their freshman year. In some sports, it's completely forbidden. You're not allowed to do that at all. The NCAA has made a lot of changes to keep that from happening. So our point is not that that's where student athletes should be, or that we expect that you guys should be at that point, will be at that point. It's just to really paint a realistic picture of that. If you're looking for scholarships, if you're looking for the best fit school, if you want to be choosing your school rather than just taking what's left over, what options there are at the end of the recruiting process, starting now as a freshman or 8th grader is going to put you in the best position to be the ones who are in the driver's seat, making that ultimate choice rather than just seeing maybe senior year, okay, this is what's left over. These are the options. I have to choose from that, which is difficult. It can put you in a tough spot. In some cases, put you in a spot where there may not be any roster spots to choose from. So I would say not a ton of contact before freshman year is happening, not where we expect you guys to be, but it helps you be in the driver's seat to achieve the goals you're hoping for, whether that's scholarships, roster spots, best fit, whatever it may be. A really good question. Awesome. Really good questions from you guys as always, and a topic that's a little bit more granular and a little bit more difficult to get through. So appreciate you guys staying with us on that. We're going to turn it over to our commitments. We have a few today. We have 4, a couple brothers, and then I'll turn it over to Phil from there. So our first set of commitments today are Cody and Austin. I'm going to say Acreage. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They actually just started up with NCSA only about 5 months ago, back in May of 2021. These are 2021 graduates. These are 2022 graduates. They started up 5 months ago, did not have any contact for baseball, really, either of them. And in that small amount of time, they were able to amass a ton. So Austin had 29 views, 14 follows, traded 4 emails with Asbury University. Very similarly, Cody had 23 views, 13 follows, and traded 2 emails with Asbury as well. So they had a unique recruiting process. We're going for different schools, ended up making the choice in the same school together. But it just shows the power of our network and the power of the steps that we talk about and how much a student athlete can do when they have our network and our resources and our coaches pointing in the right direction. So congrats to Cody and Austin for your guys' success. Phil, I'll turn it over to you for the last couple.
Awesome. And love to hear about the brothers there. Extremely excited about that. But we do have a Hadley here, Hadley Dunham, committed to Seattle University. Awesome job coming out from Hadley. Softball player, 2022 commit. Again, just committed. Extremely proud of Hadley. A little bit of a backstory there as far as her work ethic goes. And I'm really proud to talk about this because we talk about our network. We talk about our resources. We talk about a lot of the things, but really when it boils down to it, the student athlete still has to put in work. And when we talk about Hadley, again, dating back to last year, Hadley logged into her profile 386 times. Okay, that's updating information. That's making sure college coaches have the most accurate information to evaluate. That's making sure that's making sure that she's making it easy for college coaches. So tremendous job there. She came up in 225 college coach searches. Okay, really big time there. And then overall 175 views from college coaches, way far beyond Seattle University. So again, overall, Hadley put in the work, and she is well deserved of a big time program like Seattle, giving her a offer and having her commit to a school that works out for her and her family. So huge congrats there to Hadley. Next, I love it. Again, we got Megan, and again, another correlation to really some really good work ethic. Okay, Megan, she's going to be committing over to Adrian College. Megan is a lacrosse player graduating this year, 2022. And again, it goes back to that work ethic. Okay, in under a year, Megan actually logged into her profile over 179 different times. And that actually led to 555 college searches. Okay, again, that's big time when it comes to just college coach activity. Okay, what kind of traction Megan was actually pulling from the network from college coaches, looking to evaluate her, looking to get a grasp of who she is as a student athlete, who she is as far as her character, her personality. It's obviously worked out with her finding a good school like Adrian, but even beyond it, Megan actually had 60 follows from college coaches across the country, all interested in seeing what Megan would post on her profile next. So again, just a huge attribution to the work ethic, again, within the resources, but also the work ethic. And obviously just a huge congrats to Megan, also finding a really good program that fits well for her and her family at Adrian College.
Awesome. Congrats to all the commits that we had coming through here for today. And if you guys have more out there, obviously send them into us so we can shout your student athletes at. To kind of note and piggyback off of that, going back to our 2020, 2021 class, we had just under 30,000 total student athletes commit to schools and go on to play at the collegiate level. So we've had a ton of success. And the last year was a record-breaking year for us, and we want to continue helping more student athletes to have that type of success. But appreciate you guys joining us here this afternoon. I'll be back next week, I believe probably with David Kamisic or maybe Phil. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll be back talking about questions to ask yourself to help find the best college fit, which is one of the hardest parts of the recruiting process. We'll talk about what questions you can ask yourself to help point yourself in the right direction. Phil, it's great seeing you as always.
Definitely a pleasure being here with you, and also hearing from your expertise as well amongst the folks out there.
Thanks, sir. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week.